Have you ever sat in traffic behind a car so ugly or unreliable that you started questioning humanity's choices? Or maybe you've heard horror stories about vehicles that were so bad, they practically became legends, for all the wrong reasons. The world of automotive history is full of shiny triumphs, but also some truly epic disasters. From dangerous design flaws to laughably bad engineering, these aren't just cars, they're cautionary tales on four wheels. So let's take a look at the top 10 worst cars in US history. Ford Pinto. When the Ford Pinto rolled onto the scene in 1971, it was supposed to be Ford's answer to the growing demand for small, affordable cars. Instead, it became a rolling disaster and earned a permanent spot on the worst cars in American history list. Why? Because under that compact, unassuming body hid a fatal flaw. One that could turn a minor fender bender into a fiery nightmare. The Pinto's most infamous defect was its dangerously positioned fuel tank. Located just behind the rear bumper and with little protection, it was a ticking time bomb. In rear-end collisions, the tank had a nasty habit of rupturing, leaking fuel, and, on far too many occasions, causing the car to erupt in flames. Making matters worse, internal Ford documents revealed that the company knew about the problem. Engineers had even proposed a fix that would have cost just $11 per car. But in a cold calculation, Ford decided it was cheaper to pay off potential lawsuits than to make the repair. The result? Hundreds of tragic accidents and a public relations disaster. But Pinto's problems didn't stop there. It was also underpowered, with a wheezy four-cylinder engine that struggled to keep up with traffic. The interior felt like an afterthought, cheap, cramped, and built with materials that seemed to wear out faster than a pair of bargain bin sneakers. Add to that vague steering and a ride quality rough enough to loosen your fillings, and you had a car that disappointed you in just about every way. The backlash was swift and severe. By the late 1970s, the Pinto had become a cultural punchline and a symbol of corporate greed and negligence. In 1978, after intense public pressure and legal battles, Ford finally recalled 1.5 million Pintos, the largest automotive recall at the time. Yet for all its faults, the Pinto left an undeniable mark on the industry. It sparked debates about corporate responsibility and led to stronger vehicle safety regulations. In a twisted way, Pinto's failures helped pave the way for safer cars in the future. So, while the Ford Pinto may be remembered as a flaming embarrassment, its legacy reminds us of what happens when cost-cutting is prioritized over consumer safety. For that reason, it's earned its place as one of the worst cars in American history. AMC Pacer. When the AMC Pacer hit the scene in 1975, it looked like something straight out of a science fiction movie. With its bulbous shape, massive glass windows, and wide stance, AMC promised it would be the car of the future. Unfortunately, the future didn't turn out quite as planned. Instead of becoming a revolutionary icon, the Pacer became one of the most ridiculed cars in American history. And for good reason. At first glance, the Pacer's quirky fishbowl design was a bold statement in a sea of boxy sedans. AMC wanted to build a small car with big car comfort, and in theory, it wasn't a bad idea. It was even ahead of its time with safety features like an unusually wide frame for better crash protection. But beneath the futuristic facade lay a parade of problems that sent the Pacer's reputation into a tailspin. For starters, the Pacer was supposed to house a lightweight, fuel-efficient rotary engine from General Motors, a cutting-edge idea in the 1970s. However, when GM scrapped its rotary engine project, AMC was left scrambling. The only option? Shove a heavy gas-guzzling inline-six engine under the hood. This meant the Pacer was slow, painfully inefficient, and handled like a beached whale. Worse yet, its wide body and cramped engine bay made repairs a nightmare. And those panoramic windows? Sure, they looked cool, but they turned the interior into a rolling greenhouse on sunny days. Drivers roasted in the summer, no matter how much they cranked the air conditioning. Add to that AMC's notorious quality control issues, creaky interiors, rust-prone body panels, and electrical gremlins, and the Pacer quickly earned a reputation as a lemon. Despite its many flaws, the Pacer wasn't a total flop, at least not at first. It had a moment of popularity with drivers looking for something different, but as gas prices soared and better-built competitors flooded the market, its weaknesses became impossible to ignore. By 1980, AMC pulled the plug, and the Pacer faded into automotive infamy. Today, the Pacer lives on as a punchline, an example of what happens when a car company dreams big but delivers small. It's a reminder that sometimes being different isn't enough, you also have to be good. Oldsmobile Supreme Diesel, the Oldsmobile Cutlass. Supreme Diesel had all the ingredients to be a game changer, on paper at least. In the late 1970s, as gas prices skyrocketed, diesel engines seemed like the future. They promised better fuel efficiency at a time when American wallets were feeling the squeeze. General Motors wanted in on the action, and in 1978 they unveiled the diesel-powered Cutlass Supreme. It was a bold move, but also a colossal misstep. So what went wrong? In short, everything. The heart of the problem was the engine itself. Instead of designing a purpose-built diesel engine, GM tried to cut corners by converting their existing gasoline V8. This Frankenstein approach led to an engine that was fragile, underpowered, and notorious for self-destruction. Diesel engines operate under much higher pressure than gas engines, but GM's rushed design didn't reinforce key components to handle the stress. The result? Blown head gaskets, cracked engine blocks, and a parade of mechanical failures that left frustrated owners stranded on the side of the road. To make matters worse, the engine's fuel injection system was notoriously finicky. If you ran low on fuel or got a bad batch of diesel, the system would suck in air and refuse to restart, turning a quick stop into a major headache. And let's not forget the power, or rather, the lack of it. With a sluggish 120 horsepower and a glacial 0 to 60 time of nearly 20 seconds, the Cutlass Supreme Diesel turned every highway merge into a heart-pounding gamble. Reliability issues were only half the story. Word spread fast that GM's diesel engines were ticking time bombs, and resale values tanked as a result. Even loyal Oldsmobile fans started to lose faith, tarnishing the brand's once glowing reputation. In a cruel twist of irony, the Cutlass Supreme Diesel was meant to be a fuel-efficient answer to the energy crisis, but instead it became a cautionary tale about corporate greed and rushed engineering. By the mid-1980s, GM quietly phased out its diesel disaster, but the damage was done. The Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme Diesel didn't just fail, it became a symbol of everything wrong with Detroit's good-enough attitude during the era. Today, it remains one of the most infamous lemons in American automotive history, a reminder that cutting corners often leads straight to the junkyard. Cadillac Cimarron. The Cadillac Cimarron wasn't just a bad car, it was a cautionary tale. Introduced in 1981, it became the poster child for automotive missteps, proving that slapping a luxury badge on an economy car doesn't make it luxurious. It's no wonder the Cimarron is still remembered as one of the worst cars in American history. Here's the problem. Cadillac, a brand known for opulence and prestige, tried to compete with European luxury imports like BMW and Mercedes-Benz. But instead of crafting a cutting-edge, refined machine, they took a Chevrolet Cavalier, added leather seats, a little wood trim, and a higher price tag, then called it a Cadillac. Spoiler alert, no one was fooled. Under the hood, the Cimarron was just as underwhelming. Its anemic 1.8-liter four-cylinder engine wheezed out a paltry 88 horsepower, hardly the kind of power you'd expect from a brand synonymous with big V8 cruisers. Performance was sluggish, handling was unimpressive, and the ride quality, far from the smooth, cloud-like comfort Cadillac buyers were used to. Driving the Cimarron felt less like luxury and more like punishment. But the real insult, the price tag. At nearly $13,000, about $40,000 in today's money, the Cimarron cost thousands more than its Chevy sibling, yet offered little to justify the premium. Buyers weren't just disappointed, they were outraged. Cadillac's attempt to attract a younger, more European-focused crowd backfired spectacularly, damaging the brand's reputation for years. The Cimarron wasn't just a bad car, it was an identity crisis on wheels. Cadillac, once a symbol of American automotive excellence, suddenly seemed out of touch and desperate. Critics savaged it, calling it a cavalier in a tuxedo, and sales reflected the sentiment. Although it limped along until 1988, the damage was already done. In hindsight, the Cimarron taught the auto industry a valuable lesson. True luxury can't be faked. A fancy badge and a few cosmetic upgrades can't disguise a car's economic roots. Cadillac eventually rebounded, but the Cimarron remains a textbook example of what happens when a brand forgets who it is. If you ever wonder how to ruin a legacy in one fell swoop, look no further than the Cadillac Cimarron, proof that even the biggest names can make the biggest mistakes. Yugo. The Yugo, a car so infamously bad that it became a punchline in American culture. Officially known as the Yugo GV, this pint-sized disaster from Yugoslavia arrived in the US in 1985, promising basic, affordable transportation. Instead, it delivered an epic masterclass on how not to build a car. If you wanted to experience frustration, disappointment, and occasional terror behind the wheel, the Yugo had you covered. At first glance, the Yugo seemed like a decent deal. It was the cheapest new car in America, with a sticker price under $4,000. About half the cost of a Honda Civic. But as the old saying goes, you get what you pay for. Beneath its no-frills exterior lurked a cocktail of half-baked engineering and bargain bin quality control. The 1.1-liter, 55-horsepower engine struggled to move the car with any sense of urgency, while its transmission felt like stirring a bowl of cold oatmeal. Going from 0 to 60 miles per hour? Only if you had the patience of a saint and a clear downhill stretch. And reliability? Forget it! The Yugo was notorious for breaking down in new and exciting ways. Engines seized, electrical systems failed, and the exhaust had a habit of falling off mid-drive. In colder climates, the car often refused to start altogether. A significant flaw, if you say, lived somewhere with actual winters. And if it did start, there was always the lingering fear that a stray gust of wind might blow it off the road. But perhaps the Yugo's most infamous moment came in 1989 when the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration recalled the car for, you guessed it, seat belts that didn't work properly. Because nothing says trustworthy transportation like safety features that actively betray you. Despite, or perhaps because of, its flaws, the Yugo earned a cult following as the quintessential worst car ever. Late-night talk shows mocked it, comedians used it as a punchline, and even today, it's shorthand for automotive failure. By the early 90s, poor sales and a collapsing Yugoslav economy put the final nail in the Yugo's rusting coffin. In the end, the Yugo wasn't just a bad car, it was a spectacular failure that taught America an important lesson. Sometimes a bargain is too good to be true. Saturn Ion. The Saturn Ion holds a special place in the Automotive Hall of Shame, and not in a good way. Released in 2003 as a replacement for the aging Saturn S series, the Ion was supposed to usher in a new era for General Motors' once promising Saturn brand. Instead, it became a rolling punchline and a cautionary tale about what happens when cost-cutting goes too far. So, what made the Ion such a disaster? For starters, it was weird, but not the good kind of weird. While quirky cars can earn a cult following, the Ion's odd design choices left people scratching their heads. Take the instrument cluster. It wasn't behind the steering wheel where you'd expect it. Nope, it was awkwardly plopped in the center of the dashboard, forcing drivers to glance sideways just to check their speed. And don't get us started on the bizarre suicide-style rear doors in the coupe version, which made simple tasks like getting in or out a frustrating chore. But the Ion's problems weren't just skin deep. Under the hood, things got even worse. The base model was powered by a coarse and underwhelming 2.2-liter Ecotec engine that groaned under acceleration. And if you were brave enough to opt for the automatic transmission, you were rewarded with sluggish performance and gear shifts that felt about as smooth as a jackhammer. Then there was the infamous Ionic build quality, or lack thereof. The interior was a plastic paradise, and not the fancy kind. Cheap, brittle materials filled the cabin, making it feel more like a kid's toy than a proper car. Rattles and creaks were standard features, and long-term durability? Forget about it. Worst of all, the Ion became entangled in one of the most notorious recalls in GM's history. Faulty ignition switches could cause the car to shut off while driving, disabling the airbags, a defect linked to over a dozen deaths. Despite early warning signs, GM dragged its feet on fixing the problem, further cementing the Ion's legacy as a symbol of corporate negligence. By the time production ended in 2007, the Saturn Ion had already dug the brand's grave. With its bizarre design, cheap construction, and dangerous defects, it's no wonder the Ion remains a textbook example of how not to build a car. Edsel Corsair. When it comes to automotive flops, few names loom larger than the Edsel Corsair. Launched in 1958 with sky-high expectations, the Corsair wasn't just a car. It was supposed to be a revolution. Ford poured millions into marketing, promising a futuristic ride that would redefine the American road. Instead, the Edsel Corsair became a cautionary tale of corporate hubris, baffling design choices, and a spectacular sales disaster. So, what went wrong? Simple, pretty much everything. Let's start with the design and that infamous horse collar grille. Meant to look bold and distinctive, it instead resembled, well, a toilet seat. In an era where sleek, chrome-laden styling ruled, the Edsel's awkward front end was more punchline than prestige. The car's overall look was a strange mix of over-the-top curves and questionable taste, making it an instant target for ridicule. And the problems didn't stop at the curb. Under the hood, the Corsair packed a powerful 410 cubic inch V8. But even that couldn't save it. Poor quality control meant that many cars rolled off the assembly line with mechanical issues right from the start. Buyers faced leaking transmissions, faulty push-button gear selectors mounted on the steering wheel, of all places, and electrical gremlins that made driving the Edsel feel like a gamble. Worse still, Ford misread the market completely. The Edsel was priced too high for the average buyer, but lacked the luxury and cachet to attract wealthier customers. Thanks to a botched rollout, dealerships received cars late, often defective, and in some cases with parts that didn't even match the order. By the time the dust settled, the Edsel Corsair had become a symbol of automotive failure. Ford expected to sell about 200,000 units in its first year. They barely sold 63,000 across all models. By 1960, the entire Edsel brand was unceremoniously killed off, costing Ford an eye-watering $350 million, over $3 billion today when adjusted for inflation. Yet the Edsel Corsair remains unforgettable, not for its innovation, but for how spectacularly it flopped. It stands as a reminder that no amount of marketing magic can save a car that people simply don't want. If there's a hall of fame for bad cars, the Edsel Corsair holds a front row seat, and probably a broken transmission. Chevrolet Vega. When the Chevrolet Vega rolled onto the scene in 1970, it promised to be the car of the future, sleek, affordable, and fuel-efficient. General Motors hyped it as a revolutionary small car to take on rising imports like the Volkswagen Beetle and the Toyota Corolla. Instead, the Vega quickly became a cautionary tale, earning its place as one of the worst cars in American history. Why? Because almost everything that could go wrong with a car did go wrong with the Vega. Let's start with the engine, a lightweight all-aluminum disaster. While innovative on paper, in practice it was a ticking time bomb. Without proper protection, the aluminum block was prone to warping and cracking under heat. Worse yet, oil burning became a rite of passage for Vega owners. Some cars devoured oil so quickly that drivers joked about needing to carry a spare quart in the glove box. And then there was the rust. Oh, the rust! The Vega's body panels were made of thin, cost-cut steel, which meant they started corroding almost immediately. In some cases, rust appeared on showroom models before they even left the lot. It wasn't unusual to see a Vega's fenders disintegrate faster than its engine could overheat. For those living in colder climates, winter meant one thing: watching your car dissolve into a rusty relic. How about quality control? Virtually non-existent. Early Vegas were rushed through production, resulting in misaligned doors, leaky trunks, and electrical gremlins. Buyers who expected a dependable, economical car were instead treated to a symphony of mechanical failures and endless trips to the repair shop. Ironically, the Vega wasn't a total disaster from a design perspective. It looked sharp for its time, with sporty lines and a hatchback option that hinted at versatility. But good looks couldn't save a car plagued by shoddy engineering and corporate cost-cutting. By the late 1970s, the Vega's reputation was in tatters, and GM finally pulled the plug in 1977. What was meant to be a small car triumph instead became a textbook example of how not to build an automobile. To this day, the Chevrolet Vega remains a reminder that even the biggest names in the business can produce an unforgettable lemon. Sometimes history isn't kind, and in the case of the Vega, it's downright brutal. Pontiac Aztek. When it comes to automotive flops, few cars crash and burn quite like the Pontiac Aztek. It wasn't just bad, it became a punchline. Released in 2000, this mid-size crossover was meant to attract a new generation of adventurous drivers. Instead, it drove straight into the Hall of Shame, earning a reputation as one of the worst cars in American history. So what went wrong? Let's start with the design, because honestly, how could you not? With its bizarre angles, awkward two-tone cladding, and a front grille that looked like a robot frog, the Aztek was a visual disaster. Even then, General Motors executive Bob Lutz admitted the car was ungainly. In an era when SUVs were becoming sleek and stylish, the Aztek looked like it fell off the back of a sci-fi movie set, and not in a good way. But Aztek's problems didn't stop at its looks. Despite its futuristic image, the driving experience was painfully ordinary. Powered by a sluggish 3.4-liter V6 engine producing 185 horsepower, it felt underwhelming on the road. The ride was clunky, the handling was uninspired, and the fuel economy was mediocre at best. It tried to be a jack-of-all-trades, part SUV, part minivan, but ended up being a master of none. Inside, things were interesting. While the Aztek did offer some clever features, a built-in cooler and an optional tent for camping, it couldn't distract from the cheap materials and a plasticky interior that felt more like a discount bin than a premium adventure. Buyers simply didn't trust it to deliver on its bold promises. Sales reflected the disaster. Despite GM's hopes of selling 75,000 units a year, the Aztek barely managed 27,000 in its first full year. By 2005, production was mercifully put out of its misery. Yet ironically, the Aztek found an unlikely second life as a cult icon. Thanks to its prominent role as Walter White's ride in Breaking Bad, the car became an anti-hero of sorts. So bad, it's fascinating. Maserati Biturbo. In theory, the Maserati Biturbo had all the makings of a legend: an exotic Italian badge, a plush interior, and a twin turbocharged V6 promising heart-pounding performance. But in reality, it became a cautionary tale of how cutting corners can turn a dream machine into a nightmare on wheels. Launched in 1981, the Biturbo was Maserati's ambitious attempt to bring Italian luxury to the masses. It had swagger, sharp lines, a wood-trimmed cabin, and an engine that, on paper, could leave competitors in the dust. But beneath that suave exterior lurked a mechanical mess that would tarnish Maserati's reputation for years. Let's start with the heart of the beast, the twin-turbo V6. While it delivered an exhilarating punch when it worked, when was the keyword. The Biturbo's engine was notorious for blowing head gaskets, leaking oil like a sieve, and overheating with alarming regularity. The turbochargers themselves were delicate and prone to failure, often leaving owners stranded on the side of the road. And the problems didn't stop under the hood. Electrical gremlins haunted the Biturbo, turning simple tasks, like starting the car, into a gamble. Climate controls had a mind of their own, gauges were wildly inaccurate, and window regulators frequently gave up the ghost. Owning a Biturbo meant embracing the unpredictable. Then there was the rust. Despite its luxury status, Maserati apparently missed the memo on corrosion protection. Biturbos had a tendency to rust prematurely, often turning sleek Italian sheet metal into flaky reddish-brown reminders of why cutting costs rarely pays off. Quality control was practically non-existent, just like in other cars we've covered. Build materials felt cheap, and interiors crumbled under regular use. Leather cracked, switches broke, and the once lavish cabin quickly lost its luster. It didn't help that Maserati's dealer network struggled to keep up with the car's endless list of issues, leaving frustrated owners with sky-high repair bills and empty pockets. The Biturbo's spectacular failure wasn't just about poor reliability, it was a missed opportunity. Maserati had the chance to redefine affordable luxury, but instead delivered a car that left buyers wondering if they'd purchased a ticking time bomb. Today, the Maserati Biturbo lives on in infamy, an example of how bad engineering can turn a beautiful idea into one of the worst cars ever to grace American roads. So, do you have experience with any of these brands? Let us know in the comment section below.
In this video, we're taking a nostalgic ride through 10 old car features that flopped spectacularly. We'll kick things off with the vent windows, those charming little triangles that promised a cool breeze, and end with the quirky curb feelers that kept your white walls pristine. Along the way, we'll reminisce about the days of bench seats, marvel at the novelty of push-button transmissions, and chuckle at the practicality, or lack thereof, of T-tops and automatic seatbelts. So buckle up, literally, if you remember those swivel seats. But before we rev our engines into the past, don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Trust me, it'll be a ride to remember. Vent windows. Vent windows, the little triangular windows that were the hallmark of many classic cars. If you've ever had the pleasure of riding in a vintage vehicle, you might remember these quirky features. They were like the Swiss Army knife of car windows, offering a multitude of functions that, in hindsight, weren't exactly groundbreaking. Vent windows, or quarter windows as they're sometimes called, were designed to let in fresh air without the need to roll down the main window. This was especially handy before the widespread use of air conditioning in cars. Instead of having to deal with the gale force winds of a fully open window, you could simply angle the vent window to direct a gentle breeze into the cabin. It was like having nature's air conditioner, just without the temperature control. One of the less glamorous, yet oddly nostalgic uses of vent windows was as a makeshift ashtray for smokers. You could crack open the vent window just enough to flick ashes out without creating a tornado inside the car. Talk about multitasking, keeping the car cool and ash-free. Despite their practical uses, vent windows slowly fell out of favor. The rise of air conditioning in cars meant less need for auxiliary ventilation. Plus, they were a security risk. A skilled thief could easily pop open a vent window to unlock the car door. Not exactly what you'd call a feature, more like an invitation. Curiously, vent windows had a sort of renaissance in the world of car enthusiasts. For those restoring classic cars, finding a vent window in good condition can be a treasure hunt. Bench seats. Remember the good old days when you could slide right over to the middle of the car seat to snuggle up with your sweetheart while cruising down Main Street? These all-encompassing front seats were a staple in many classic cars, designed to fit 3 people across like a cozy couch on wheels. Bench seats were the epitome of automotive luxury and convenience. Back in the day, they provided ample seating for an entire family or a group of friends, with no pesky center console getting in the way. This made them perfect for romantic drives, or for cramming in an extra friend when your car was the designated party mobile. Of course, bench seats weren't just about seating capacity. They had a certain nostalgic charm that modern bucket seats just can't match. Remember when you'd scoot over to the driver's side to impress a date, or when your mom or dad would effortlessly slide across to get out on the curbside to avoid traffic? These were the days when driving felt like a communal activity, with everyone in the front row sharing the experience. However, like many features on our list, bench seats eventually fell out of favor. Safety regulations and the advent of center consoles, with their convenient cup holders and storage compartments, made the bench seat seem a bit outdated. And let's not forget the introduction of seat belts, which were easier to manage with bucket seats. It turns out, sliding across a bench seat wasn't so great when it meant untangling a mess of seat belts every time you got in and out of the car. Despite their decline, bench seats have a special place in the hearts of car enthusiasts. They're a symbol of a bygone era when cars were as much about style and personality as they were about practicality. In fact, some modern vehicles have tried to bring back the bench seat feel with split bench designs, but it's just not the same as that uninterrupted stretch of cushion. One fun fact about bench seats: they were a favorite for drive-in movie theaters. You could cuddle up with your date or sprawl out with a group of friends, turning your car into the perfect cinema experience. Try doing that in a modern car with bucket seats and a giant center console in the way. Column shifters. If you've ever been in an older car and wondered what that lever sticking out from the steering column was, congratulations, you've encountered a column shifter. These curious contraptions were once a common sight, acting as the gear selector for automatic and manual transmissions alike. Column shifters had their heyday from the 1940s through the 1970s, and they were the epitome of automotive innovation and design efficiency. The idea was simple. By mounting the shifter on the steering column, car manufacturers could free up precious real estate on the floor, making way for that beloved bench seat we just talked about. Imagine a time when front seats could transform into a pseudo sofa, perfect for cruising and canoodling with no gear stick poking into your romantic plans. Operating a column shifter required a bit of a learning curve. You'd push or pull the lever, often through a series of clicks, to change gears. For those who mastered it, the motion became second nature, a bit like a secret handshake among vintage car enthusiasts. And let's not forget the added bonus of being able to shift gears while keeping your other hand comfortably around your date. Despite their charm, column shifters gradually fell out of favor. As car designs evolved, so did preferences for more ergonomic and driver-focused interiors. Floor-mounted shifters became the norm, offering a more intuitive and sporty driving experience. Plus, advancements in automatic transmission technology made the need for a column shifter less relevant. But there's a certain nostalgia attached to the column shifter. It harkens back to a time when cars had a unique personality, each feature telling a story. In fact, some car manufacturers have attempted to revive the column shifter in modern vehicles as a nod to their classic roots. Trucks in particular have held onto the column shifter for its practicality and space-saving benefits. A fun fact about column shifters: they were sometimes referred to as 3 on the tree for 3-speed manuals or 4 on the floor for their floor-mounted counterparts. This colorful terminology has become a part of car culture, a testament to how deeply these features have embedded themselves in the collective memory of car enthusiasts. Fender-mounted mirrors. Now let's travel back to the golden era of automobiles, when fender-mounted mirrors were the epitome of style and sophistication. These external mirrors, perched elegantly on the front fenders of cars, were a distinctive feature that set classic cars apart from their modern counterparts. Fender-mounted mirrors were more than just a fashion statement. They were designed to give drivers a better field of view. Placed further forward on the fenders, they provided a wide-angle perspective, reducing blind spots and offering a panoramic view of the road behind. In theory, this sounds fantastic, right? Better visibility and enhanced safety. Sign us up. However, in practice, fender-mounted mirrors came with their own set of quirks. Adjusting these mirrors required the dexterity of a contortionist or the patience to pull over, get out, and manually tweak them until they were just right. Not exactly convenient, especially if you were in a hurry or in the middle of traffic. And let's not forget the aesthetic challenge. They often made the car look like it had tiny antlers. Despite these inconveniences, fender-mounted mirrors hold a special place in automotive history. They were a hallmark of elegance and sophistication, often seen on luxury models and sports cars. They also added a unique character to the car's design, making each vehicle instantly recognizable. One curious tidbit about fender-mounted mirrors: they became popular in Japan well into the 1980s, long after they had fallen out of favor in other parts of the world. Japanese manufacturers believed that the mirror's forward placement provided superior visibility, especially in the tight confines of urban driving. This led to some models sporting these mirrors long after they disappeared from Western markets. Fender-mounted mirrors also made frequent appearances in Hollywood. Classic films often featured sleek cars with these stylish mirrors, adding to the glamour and allure of the vehicles on screen. They were synonymous with the charm and elegance of a bygone era when driving was as much about making an impression as it was about getting to your destination. As technology advanced, side mirrors migrated to the doors, offering easier adjustments and better aerodynamics. Modern cars benefit from heated mirrors, power adjustments, and even blind spot detection systems, making the quaint fender-mounted mirror seem like a relic from another time. But for car enthusiasts and collectors, these mirrors are a cherished reminder of the artistry and individuality that defined classic car design. 8-track players. The 8-track player, a groovy blast from the past that promised to revolutionize in-car entertainment. If you were cruising down the highway in the late 60s or 70s, chances are you had an 8-track tape blasting your favorite tunes. These chunky cartridges were the precursors to cassettes and CDs, and they brought the magic of music on the road in a way that was nothing short of revolutionary. 8-track players were introduced in the 1960s and quickly became a must-have feature in cars. The idea was simple: an endless loop of magnetic tape divided into 8 tracks, each containing a set of songs. You could switch between tracks with a satisfying click, and the music would play continuously, without the need to flip the tape. It was like having a jukebox right in your dashboard. For a while, 8 tracks were the pinnacle of automotive audio technology. They offered a level of convenience and quality that vinyl records simply couldn't match, especially in the bumpy, jostling environment of a car. Road trips became soundtracked adventures, with the latest hits from bands like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and Fleetwood Mac filling the cabin. However, despite their initial popularity, 8-track players had some serious drawbacks. The tapes were notorious for their fragility, prone to jamming, tangling, and even melting in the summer heat. There was also the peculiar habit of songs abruptly changing tracks in the middle, leading to an awkward silence or a sudden musical jump. Nothing quite like a dramatic pause in the middle of your favorite chorus to keep you on your toes. Moreover, 8 tracks were bulky and took up a lot of space, both in the car and in storage. Carrying around a collection of these tapes was like lugging a small suitcase, a far cry from today's compact digital libraries. As technology advanced, 8 tracks were swiftly overtaken by cassette tapes, which were smaller, more reliable, and offered better sound quality. Despite their fall from grace, 8-track players have a dedicated fan base among vintage car enthusiasts. They evoke a sense of nostalgia, a reminder of a time when car music systems were just beginning to come into their own. Collectors and restorers often go to great lengths to find functioning 8-track players and tapes, relishing the retro vibe they bring to classic cars. One interesting tidbit, some 8-track players featured a program button that allowed you to switch between the 4 programs on the tape, effectively giving you more control over your listening experience. This was a precursor to the shuffle and skip functions we take for granted today. Automatic seatbelts. Automatic seatbelts, one of the automotive industry's bold attempts to merge safety with convenience. If you ever rode in a car from the late 80s or early 90s, you might remember these peculiar contraptions. Designed to ensure that drivers and passengers always buckled up, automatic seatbelts seemed like a clever solution to a serious problem. But as with many innovative ideas, the execution was a bit of a mixed bag. The concept behind automatic seatbelts was simple. As soon as you sat down and closed the car door, the seatbelt would automatically glide into place, securing you without any effort on your part. It was like having a robotic butler who was very concerned about your safety. These systems typically featured a motorized shoulder belt that moved along a track mounted on the door frame or windowsill, while a separate lap belt still had to be fastened manually. In theory, automatic seatbelts were brilliant. They ensured that even the most forgetful or rebellious drivers and passengers would be safely strapped in. This was particularly important during a time when seatbelt usage was not as universally accepted as it is today. By making seatbelt usage unavoidable, manufacturers hoped to reduce injuries and save lives. However, the reality of automatic seatbelts was less than perfect. For starters, the systems could be surprisingly intrusive. Many drivers found the belts awkward and uncomfortable as they slid into place, sometimes catching on clothing or pinching skin. The novelty of being strapped in by a machine quickly wore off when faced with these daily annoyances. Another significant issue was that the automatic shoulder belt provided a false sense of security. Because the lap belt still needed to be fastened manually, many people neglected this crucial step, thinking the shoulder belt alone was sufficient. This incomplete usage actually compromised safety rather than enhancing it. Moreover, the mechanisms of automatic seatbelts were prone to malfunction. The motorized tracks could jam or wear out, leaving the belt stuck in awkward positions. Repairing these systems was often costly and complicated, leading to frustration for car owners. Despite their drawbacks, automatic seatbelts were an important step in the evolution of vehicle safety. They highlighted the need for better seatbelt compliance and paved the way for more sophisticated systems. By the mid-1990s, airbags had become a standard feature in cars, and improved seatbelt designs, including pretensioners and force limiters, offered better protection without the hassle of automation. One amusing tidbit, the novelty of automatic seatbelts made them a bit of a pop culture icon. They appeared in movies and TV shows, often as a symbol of futuristic or high-tech cars. It's a nostalgic reminder of a time when the future of driving seemed to be just around the corner, even if it involved a few hiccups along the way. Push-button transmissions. Push-button transmissions, an innovation that felt like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, promised to make shifting gears as easy as pressing a button. Debuting primarily in the 1950s and 60s, this futuristic feature turned the mundane task of gear selection into a space-age experience. Imagine driving your classic car, and instead of a shifter, you're greeted with a sleek panel of buttons. Talk about feeling like George Jetson. The idea behind push-button transmissions was to simplify the driving experience. Traditional gear levers were bulky and required a certain level of mechanical engagement. Push-button systems, on the other hand, replaced the clunky shifter with a series of buttons on the dashboard. Drivers could change gears by simply pressing the appropriate button, one for park, another for drive, and so on. This design not only freed up space, but also aimed to modernize the driving experience. One of the first and most notable adopters of this technology was Chrysler, with its Torque-Flight push-button transmission introduced in 1956. Other manufacturers like Edsel and Mercury soon followed suit, incorporating similar systems into their models. The sleek, button-laden dashboards were a hit with consumers who were eager to embrace the future. However, push-button transmissions weren't without their quirks. One of the main issues was reliability. The mechanical and electrical systems controlling the buttons could be temperamental, leading to instances where cars wouldn't shift properly or at all. Imagine pressing drive and nothing happening. Not exactly the seamless future people were hoping for. Another challenge was the unfamiliarity and confusion it introduced for drivers. Traditional gear levers provided tactile feedback and a sense of mechanical connection that push buttons lacked. The new system required a bit of a learning curve, and in stressful situations like an emergency stop, instinctively reaching for a button instead of a lever proved problematic for some. Despite these issues, push-button transmissions were undeniably cool and added a touch of futuristic flair to the cars that featured them. They were a symbol of innovation and progress during a time when the automotive industry was rapidly evolving. A fun fact, the 1958 Edsel, often remembered for its commercial failure, featured the Teletouch system, which placed the transmission buttons in the center of the steering wheel hub. This unique placement was both its selling point and downfall, as it was prone to malfunction and not as intuitive as initially hoped. By the mid-1960s, most manufacturers had phased out push-button transmissions in favor of more conventional and reliable systems. However, the allure of the push-button never fully disappeared. Modern cars have reintroduced the concept with electronic gear selectors and push-button starts, proving that some ideas are simply ahead of their time. T-tops, or T-bar roof panels were the ultimate blend of hardtop durability and open-air freedom, making them a beloved feature of many sporty cars from the 1970s and 80s. If you ever wanted to feel the wind in your hair without committing to a full convertible, T-tops were the perfect compromise. They offered a unique driving experience that was as much about style as it was about sensation. The design of T-tops involved two removable roof panels that, when taken off, left a solid bar running down the middle of the car's roof, forming a T-shape. This structure provided extra rigidity compared to traditional convertibles, which was particularly appealing for sports cars that needed to maintain their performance and handling characteristics. It was a way to have your cake and eat it too, enjoying the thrill of open-air driving while keeping the structural integrity of a hardtop. Pontiac was one of the first major manufacturers to introduce T-tops on their Firebird in 1976, and the concept quickly caught on. Other brands, including Chevrolet with their Camaro, followed suit. T-tops became synonymous with the muscle car and sporty coupe scene, embodying a sense of freedom and rebellion. However, T-tops weren't without their drawbacks. One of the biggest issues was water leakage. The seals around the removable panels were often less than perfect, leading to a not-so-fun surprise on rainy days. Owners would frequently find themselves with wet seats and damp interiors, turning their sleek sports car into an unintended aquarium. Additionally, removing and storing the panels could be cumbersome. They required a bit of muscle to lift off and a safe place to store them while driving, which wasn't always convenient. Despite these challenges, T-tops held a special place in the hearts of car enthusiasts. They were a defining feature of an era, a symbol of the carefree spirit of the 70s and 80s. The sight of a Firebird or Camaro with its T-tops off, cruising down the highway, evokes a strong sense of nostalgia and coolness that modern cars can rarely match. One interesting tidbit about T-tops is their appearance in pop culture. They became iconic through their presence in TV shows and movies. Think of the black Pontiac Trans Am in Smokey and the Bandit, or the red Ferrari 308 GTS driven by Tom Selleck in Magnum P.I. These cars with their T-tops removed epitomize the cool factor of the time. As car designs evolved and sunroofs and convertibles improved, the popularity of T-tops waned. By the early 2000s, they had mostly disappeared from new car models. However, they remain a cherished feature for collectors and fans of classic cars. Restoring and maintaining T-tops can be a labor of love, but for those who remember their heyday, it's well worth the effort. Swivel seats. Swivel seats, the rotating chairs of the automotive world, were a quirky yet fascinating feature that promised to bring a new level of convenience and comfort to car interiors. Introduced primarily in the 1970s, these seats were designed to make getting in and out of cars easier, especially for drivers and passengers who might struggle with the typical slide and twist motion required by conventional car seats. The concept of swivel seats was as simple as it was innovative. The front seats could rotate, usually up to 90 degrees, allowing you to face the door directly when entering or exiting the vehicle. This was particularly appealing for older adults, people with mobility issues, or anyone who appreciated a touch of futuristic flair in their ride. Imagine arriving at your destination, smoothly rotating your seat, and stepping out with ease, like you were making a grand entrance every time you park. One of the early adopters of swivel seats was General Motors, which offered them in models like the Chevrolet Monte Carlo and the Oldsmobile Cutlass. These seats were typically controlled by a lever or a simple push button, making them user-friendly and intuitive. For families, swivel seats added a layer of practicality, making it easier to manage car seats and help children in and out of the car. However, as with many ambitious automotive innovations, swivel seats had their share of challenges. One of the main issues was safety. While the seats were designed to lock in place once the car was in motion, there were concerns about their stability and the potential for malfunction in the event of an accident. Ensuring that the seats remained securely locked during driving required robust mechanisms, which sometimes proved to be problematic. Another drawback was the complexity and cost of the swivel seat mechanism. The additional parts and engineering needed to make the seats rotate smoothly added weight and expense to the cars, which ultimately made them less appealing in a market that was becoming increasingly competitive. Despite these issues, swivel seats remain a beloved feature among car enthusiasts and collectors. They are a nostalgic reminder of a time when automakers were willing to take bold risks and try out innovative ideas to enhance the driving experience. Today, the concept of swivel seats lives on in some modern minivans and luxury vehicles, where rear seats can rotate to create a more social, lounge-like atmosphere. An interesting tidbit about swivel seats: they were not just confined to American cars. European manufacturers, like Saab, experimented with similar concepts. Saab's version even included a seat that could turn to face the rear of the car, creating a mobile office or meeting space. A true testament to the versatile thinking of the time. Curb feelers. Curb feelers, those whimsical, springy metal wires protruding from the fenders of classic cars, were the unsung heroes of parking in the 1950s and 60s. These curious gadgets were designed to help drivers avoid scraping their white wall tires and pristine hubcaps against the unforgiving concrete of curbs. Think of them as the early predecessors to today's parking sensors, albeit with a bit more flair and a touch of humor. The basic idea behind curb feelers was simple. As you approached the curb, the feelers, which were mounted low on the vehicle, would make contact with the concrete first, creating a distinct scraping sound. This audible alert was your cue to stop, sparing your tires and rims from unsightly damage. For many drivers, especially those piloting large, unwieldy cars of the era, curb feelers were a godsend. One of the most charming aspects of curb feelers was their simplicity. There were no electronics, no need for power sources, just a piece of bent metal that did its job reliably. They were usually installed on the passenger side, where drivers had the most difficulty judging distance to the curb, and sometimes even on both sides for added security. Installing curb feelers was an easy aftermarket upgrade, making them accessible to anyone looking to protect their precious wheel. Curb feelers also had a certain aesthetic appeal. They added a touch of personality and a hint of practicality to cars. Seeing a vehicle with these quirky appendages was a sure sign that the owner cared about their car and was keen on preserving its good looks. It was a blend of function and flair that gave cars a unique character. Despite their practicality, curb feelers eventually fell out of favor. Advances in car design, such as improved driver visibility, better mirror placement, and the advent of power steering, made parking less of a challenge. As cars became more compact and easier to maneuver, the need for curb feelers diminished. Moreover, the rise of modern technology, including ultrasonic parking sensors and rear-view cameras, rendered these mechanical feelers obsolete. However, curb feelers remain a beloved feature among classic car enthusiasts. They evoke a sense of nostalgia for a time when driving required a bit more skill and awareness. For those restoring vintage vehicles, adding curb feelers can be the perfect finishing touch, a nod to the practical ingenuity of the past. An interesting tidbit about curb feelers: they weren't just limited to cars. They found their way onto bicycles and motorcycles, helping riders avoid damaging their wheels and frames. This cross-vehicle application highlights their versatile appeal and practical value. The 1980s were a golden era for cars, packed with bold designs and features that made driving unforgettable. In this video, we'll explore 20 forgotten car features from the 1980s we want back. From pop-up headlights to cassette decks, these features defined the decade. How many of them do you remember? Let's dive in. Pop-up headlights. Do you remember the magic of pop-up headlights? These sleek, retractable lights weren't just functional, they were a statement. Whether it was a Pontiac Firebird, a Mazda RX-7, or a Chevrolet Corvette, the unmistakable charm of these hidden eyes gave 80s cars an unmatched personality. Pop-up headlights weren't just a design choice, they embodied the futuristic vibes of the era. There was something undeniably cool about the way they flipped open, as if the car was winking at you. Beyond their aesthetic appeal, they also served a practical purpose. Hiding the headlights streamlined the car's design, reducing drag and enhancing its sporty look. However, they weren't perfect. Pop-up headlights required motors to raise and lower the lights, and these mechanisms could fail over time, leaving one headlight awkwardly stuck in place. As safety regulations evolved and pedestrian protection became a priority, pop-up headlights became impractical for modern designs. But for car enthusiasts, pop-up headlights remain a symbol of an era when cars dared to be bold, playful, and full of personality. Their absence in today's automotive world leaves us longing for a time when vehicles felt alive and uniquely expressive. T-tops. Nothing screamed cool in the 1980s quite like T-tops. These removable roof panels were the perfect blend of a hardtop security and a convertible's open-air thrill. Popularized by cars like the Pontiac Trans Am and the Chevrolet Camaro, T-tops became synonymous with freedom and style. Removing the panels was easy and fun, transforming your car into an instant head-turner. Cruising down the highway with the wind rushing in through the T-tops made every drive feel like a scene from an 80s action movie. They also had a certain practicality, providing an open-air experience without sacrificing the rigidity of a full roof, which was important for performance cars. Of course, T-tops weren't without their quirks. They could be prone to leaks during rainstorms, and storing the panels in the trunk could take up valuable space. Still, their unique design made them unforgettable, and their disappearance from modern cars feels like a loss for anyone who values both style and nostalgia. Velour upholstery. Picture this, sliding into the driver's seat and being greeted by the soft, plush comfort of velour upholstery. In the 1980s, velour wasn't just a fabric, it was a statement of luxury and coziness that made every car feel like your living room on wheels. Unlike today's slick leather or minimalist cloth seats, velour offered a warm, inviting texture that felt premium without being overly formal. Its bold, vibrant colors, often paired with funky patterns, added personality to car interiors, making every ride a visual and tactile experience. Velour was especially popular in family sedans and luxury vehicles, appealing to drivers who wanted both comfort and style. It was durable too, standing up to wear and tear better than you might think. But as the 90s rolled in, automotive trends shifted towards sleeker, more understated materials, leaving velour behind. Even so, for those who experienced it, velour remains a nostalgic reminder of an era when cars weren't just about function. They were about making you feel at home, even on the road. Digital dashboards. In the 1980s, digital dashboards felt like something straight out of a science fiction movie. Instead of traditional dials and gauges, these glowing panels used LED or LCD displays to present speed, fuel levels, and other vital stats. They turned ordinary cars into futuristic rides that felt like they belonged in Knight Rider. Cars like the Buick Riata, Dodge Daytona, and even the Cadillac Eldorado embraced this high-tech trend, wowing drivers with displays that looked like they were plucked from a spaceship. Animated graphics, digital speedometers, and even voice alerts added to the excitement, making the driving experience feel cutting edge. But digital dashboards weren't just about aesthetics. They offered improved readability and allowed for more data to be presented in creative ways. Unfortunately, the technology of the time wasn't always reliable. Screens could fade, pixels might burn out, and repairing these systems was often expensive. Today, modern cars use digital displays in a completely different way, but the charm of those early 80s dashboards lives on as a symbol of a decade when innovation and imagination went hand in hand. Manual window cranks. Do you remember the satisfying simplicity of rolling down your window with a manual crank? Before power windows became standard, these little cranks were a staple in every car. They were functional, reliable, and added a tactile experience to the act of driving. Manual window cranks were incredibly straightforward. You didn't need electronics or motors, just a quick twist of the wrist, and your window was down. They were perfect for times when you needed ventilation or just wanted to interact with the world outside your car. One of their biggest advantages? They rarely broke. Unlike power windows, which rely on motors and switches that could fail, manual cranks were virtually foolproof. Even if something did go wrong, repairs were simple and cheap. As power windows took over in the late 80s and 90s, manual cranks began to disappear. While power windows are undeniably convenient, there's something nostalgic about the physical connection manual cranks gave us to our cars. They remind us of a time when simplicity and functionality were valued just as much as innovation. Cassette decks with equalizers. Remember cruising down the road with your favorite mixtape playing, adjusting the sound to perfection on the car's built-in equalizer? In the 1980s, cassette decks were more than just music players. They were the heart of your car's audio system. Paired with manual equalizers, they gave drivers control over bass, treble, and balance, ensuring every track sounded just right. Cassette decks were an essential part of car culture in the 80s. Whether you were blasting rock anthems or smooth ballads, the tactile experience of inserting a cassette and hearing that satisfying click was a ritual. Equalizers elevated the experience, letting you fine-tune the sound to suit your mood or the song. While CDs and digital audio eventually replaced cassettes, there's a distinct charm in the nostalgia of analog sound. Cassette decks and equalizers weren't just functional, they were a part of the driving experience that made every trip memorable. Retractable antennas. There was something undeniably cool about watching your car's antenna rise and retract at the push of a button. Retractable antennas were a small but sophisticated touch that added a sense of luxury to 1980s vehicles. Found in cars like the Toyota Supra and Mercedes-Benz models, they were a feature that combined practicality with style. These antennas weren't just for show, they served a functional purpose, improving radio reception without permanently protruding from the car's exterior. When not in use, they tucked away neatly, preserving the sleek design of the vehicle and avoiding damage from weather or car washes. While modern cars integrate antennas into windows or roof fins, the charm of a retractable antenna remains unmatched. It was a small detail that made cars feel dynamic and interactive, leaving a lasting impression on anyone who drove with one. Automatic seatbelts. Love them or hate them, automatic seatbelts were a quirky hallmark of 1980s automotive safety. Designed to comply with new safety regulations, these belts moved along a track to secure passengers automatically when the car door closed. While they could be finicky, they were undeniably futuristic at the time. Cars like the Toyota Camry and Ford Escort featured this innovative system, making seatbelt use unavoidable, whether passengers liked it or not. While some found them convenient, others found the constant movement intrusive, and the belts were often unreliable, occasionally failing to lock properly. Despite their short-lived popularity, automatic seatbelts remain a memorable innovation that symbolized a decade of creative automotive experimentation. Ashtrays and cigarette lighters. In the 1980s, ashtrays and cigarette lighters weren't just standard, they were essential features in every car. Smoking was far more common then, and these built-in conveniences catered to the needs of drivers and passengers alike. Ashtrays were often placed in easy-to-reach locations, like the center console or rear doors, complete with stylish designs that blended seamlessly with the car's interior. Cigarette lighters, meanwhile, doubled as power sources for early car gadgets like portable fans and CB radios. As smoking rates declined and health awareness grew, these features disappeared from car designs. While their absence makes sense in today's cars, they remain a nostalgic reminder of a time when vehicles catered to an entirely different set of habits. Car phones. If you had a car phone in the 1980s, you were the epitome of success. car phones were the ultimate status symbol, showcasing wealth and technological sophistication. Installed in luxury cars like Mercedes-Benz and Cadillac models, they offered a glimpse into a future where staying connected on the go was possible. Car phones were bulky and expensive, often requiring large receivers mounted in the console or between the seats. Despite their limitations, they were a game changer for professionals who needed to stay reachable while driving. The sight of someone talking on a car phone was enough to turn heads and inspire envy. While mobile phones eventually replaced them, car phones symbolized the bold innovation of the 80s, when technology in cars felt futuristic and extravagant. Built-in compass. Do you remember when having a compass built into your car felt like cutting-edge technology? In the 1980s, these small but handy tools became a common feature in many vehicles, helping drivers navigate in an era before GPS. Often integrated into the dashboard or rearview mirror, they were a simple yet effective way to orient yourself on long road trips or unfamiliar highways. Built-in compasses weren't just practical, they added a sense of adventure to driving. Seeing the direction displayed as you cruised down the road made you feel like an explorer charting a course. Whether heading north for a weekend getaway or east for the holidays, the compass provided reassurance and a touch of sophistication to your vehicle's interior. While GPS and digital navigation have made traditional compasses obsolete, there's a certain nostalgia in their simplicity. They remind us of a time when driving required a bit more intuition and a sense of direction was a valued skill. Turbo boost gauges. For car enthusiasts in the 1980s, turbo boost gauges were the epitome of cool. Found in performance cars like the Ford Mustang SVO or the Saab 900 Turbo, these gauges displayed how much extra power the turbocharger was delivering. Watching the needle rise as you pressed the accelerator was an exhilarating experience, making you feel connected to the raw power of your engine. Turbochargers were a relatively new innovation for consumer cars in the 80s, and the boost gauge wasn't just a functional tool, it was a statement. It signaled that you were driving something special, a machine built for speed and excitement. Today, turbochargers are more common, but the standalone boost gauge has largely disappeared, replaced by integrated digital systems. For those who remember the thrill of seeing that needle climb, turbo boost gauges remain a cherished relic of 80s automotive enthusiasm. Pop-out rear windows. If you owned a compact car in the 1980s, chances are you enjoyed the practicality of pop-out rear windows. These small hinged windows could be manually opened to provide fresh air without fully rolling down the main windows. They were a simple yet ingenious solution for ventilation, especially in two-door cars where rear passengers didn't have their own windows to operate. Popular in cars like the Volkswagen Rabbit and Honda Civic, pop-out rear windows were a favorite among families and commuters alike. They allowed airflow on warm days without creating the wind tunnel effect of fully open windows. Although they've largely disappeared in modern designs, pop-out rear windows had a charm all their own. They were practical, easy to use, and added a unique touch to compact car designs of the era. Colorful pinstriping. In the 1980s, a car's paint job wasn't complete without some stylish pinstriping. Whether it was a bold stripe down the sides or intricate patterns accentuating the hood, colorful pinstriping added personality to every vehicle. It was a way to stand out on the road and make your car uniquely yours. Pinstriping wasn't just about aesthetics, it also reflected the trends of the time. Bright colors and bold lines were synonymous with the flashy, expressive style of the 80s. Car manufacturers often offered factory pinstriping, but aftermarket customizations were also wildly popular, allowing drivers to showcase their creativity. Today, pinstriping has mostly faded away, replaced by more minimalist designs. But for those who remember the joy of adding a splash of color to their ride, it remains a fond memory of a time when cars were as unique as their drivers. Flip-up sunroofs. Before panoramic glass roofs became the norm, flip-up sunroofs were the go-to option for enjoying the sun and fresh air while driving. These manually operated sunroofs could be tilted up or fully removed, offering a flexible way to bring the outdoors into your car. Flip-up sunroofs were especially popular in compact cars like the Toyota Corolla and Volkswagen Golf. They were easy to use, affordable, and didn't require the complex mechanisms of modern electric sunroofs. The simplicity of flipping it open for a little extra ventilation or popping it out entirely for a sunny day cruise made them a favorite among drivers in the 80s. While modern sunroofs offer more convenience, they lack the hands-on charm of flip-up designs. For many, these sunroofs represent a time when cars were about simple pleasures and enjoying the journey just as much as the destination. Wood grain dash panels. In the 1980s, nothing said classy quite like a wood grain dash panel. Whether it was genuine wood veneer or a convincing imitation, this design choice added a touch of sophistication to car interiors. Found in luxury models like Cadillacs and Lincolns, as well as family station wagons, wood grain dashes evoked the feel of a high-end living room on wheels. The appeal wasn't just about aesthetics, it was about creating an experience. Sitting behind a wood grain dash felt luxurious, as if the car was an extension of refined taste. Paired with plush velour seats and analog clocks, it transformed the driving experience into something more elevated and personal. As the 90s ushered in sleeker, more minimalist designs, wood grain interiors became a relic of the past. Still, for those who remember them, they symbolize an era when cars prioritized comfort and elegance over pure functionality. Voice warning systems.
Please close your passenger door. Please close your driver door.
Your door is ajar. If you drove certain 1980s cars, you might remember being greeted by a robotic voice warning system. Found in models like the Chrysler New Yorker and the Datsun Maxima, these systems were an early attempt at integrating technology into vehicles, adding a futuristic touch to everyday driving. These voice systems delivered alerts about everything from low fuel to unfastened seatbelts. At the time, they felt like a leap into the future, offering a more interactive driving experience. Drivers appreciated the novelty, even if the voice sometimes bordered on annoying. While modern cars have replaced these robotic warnings with visual alerts and smartphone integration, the charm of a monotone voice delivering safety messages remains a quirky memory of 80s automotive innovation. Hidden fuel caps. The 1980s loved clever design touches, and hidden fuel caps were one of the most ingenious features of the era. Concealed behind taillights, emblems, or panels, these fuel caps added a sense of sleekness and surprise to vehicles. Models like the Chevrolet Camaro and Cadillac Eldorado embraced this design, offering a clean, streamlined look. Hidden fuel caps weren't just about aesthetics. They also protected the fuel tank from dirt and debris. There was something satisfying about flipping open a taillight to reveal the cap, making a mundane task like refueling feel a little cooler. Though practicality eventually phased them out, hidden fuel caps are fondly remembered by car enthusiasts who missed the days when even the smallest details were designed to impress. Boxy designs. The cars of the 1980s were unapologetically boxy. From the Volvo 240 to the Ford Bronco, sharp angles and straight lines defined the decade's automotive aesthetic. These designs weren't just about looks. They prioritized functionality, maximizing interior space and providing better visibility for drivers. Boxy cars had a sense of durability and presence that's often lacking in today's aerodynamic designs. They were easy to work on, with straightforward body panels that could be repaired or customized without hassle. Their shapes also gave them a unique personality, making them instantly recognizable on the road. Though modern cars have embraced curves and sleek silhouettes, the bold simplicity of boxy designs remains a nostalgic favorite for those who grew up riding in these sturdy, angular vehicles. Full-size spare tires. Remember when spare tires weren't just tiny emergency replacements but full-sized, ready-to-go backups? In the 1980s, full-size spares were a standard feature in most cars, offering drivers peace of mind and the convenience of a fully functional replacement tire. These spares were often tucked neatly into the trunk, sometimes under a stylish cover. They weren't just practical, they added a sense of preparedness and reliability to the driving experience. If you had a flat, you didn't have to limp to the nearest repair shop. You could drive confidently on your spare as though nothing had happened. As car manufacturers began prioritizing trunk space and weight savings, full-size spares gave way to smaller temporary donut tires. While the change made sense logistically, it marked the end of an era when cars came equipped for any emergency, no matter how big or small. These forgotten car features from the 1980s take us back to a time when vehicles were as bold and unique as the decade itself. From pop-up headlights to cassette decks, they brought personality and innovation to our driving experiences. Which of these features do you miss the most? Let us know in the comments below. The 1980s, what a time to be alive. Big hair, bold fashion statements, and some of the most awesomely terrible cars ever to hit the road. I'm talking real clunkers, folks. Cars so bad, they're almost good. Almost. You're about to see the 10 worst cars of the 80s that failed and nobody wants to remember. Reliant Robin. The Reliant Robin, with its quirky three-wheel design, was a true 80s oddball, but beneath its comical appearance lurked some serious safety concerns. This fiberglass-bodied car had a pesky habit of tipping over at the slightest provocation, making even a leisurely Sunday drive feel like a high-stakes adventure. Its lightweight construction may have been great for fuel economy, but it left the Robin vulnerable to all sorts of bumps and bruises. And let's not forget the infamous Top Gear segment where Jeremy Clarkson put the Robin stability to the test, with hilariously disastrous results. As he so eloquently put it, driving it was as dangerous as inviting your mum round for an evening on chat roulette. But despite its flaws, the Reliant Robin remains a beloved icon of the 80s. Its quirky charm and plucky spirit make it impossible to forget, even if it did have a tendency to roll over at inopportune moments. Love it or hate it, the Robin was definitely one of a kind. Speaking of one of a kind cars, the Aston Martin Lagonda was another 80s standout, but for very different reasons. Aston Martin Lagonda. The Aston Martin Lagonda, on the other hand, was the epitome of 80s luxury gone wrong. This sleek, futuristic sedan boasted cutting-edge technology, like a digital dashboard straight out of a sci-fi flick. But beneath its stylish exterior lurked a host of problems that would make even the most diehard Aston Martin fan think twice. For starters, the Lagonda's electronics were about as reliable as a politician's promise. Owners often found themselves stranded on the side of the road, cursing the very gadgets that were supposed to make their lives easier. And if you thought the electronics were bad, just wait until you hear about the fuel consumption. The Lagonda guzzled gas like it was going out of style, which was a real problem considering the oil crisis of the 70s. Filling up the tank was like taking out a second mortgage, and the measly 8 miles per gallon made even the most gas-guzzling SUVs look like eco-friendly hybrids. But perhaps the biggest issue with the Lagonda was its astronomical price tag. At 20,000 pounds, about $200,000 in today's money, it was a car reserved for the wealthy elite. And what did they get for their hard-earned cash? A car that spent more time in the shop than on the road. Despite its futuristic design and luxurious status, the Lagonda was a prime example of how even the most prestigious brands can miss the mark. It's a cautionary tale of what happens when style trumps substance, and a reminder that even the most advanced technology is useless if it doesn't work. But the Lagonda wasn't the only 80s car to fall short of expectations. Another notorious example was the Yugo GV, a tiny hatchback that promised big things but delivered nothing but headaches. The Yugo GV was a veritable poster child for automotive mediocrity in the 1980s. This pint-sized hatchback, hailing from the former Yugoslavia, quickly earned a reputation as one of the most notorious lemons to ever grace the roads. Its shoddy build quality and propensity for breakdowns made it the butt of countless jokes and cemented its status as a symbol of inefficiency. Owners of the ill-fated Yugo often found themselves stranded on the side of the road, cursing the day they ever laid eyes on this mechanical monstrosity. The car's flimsy construction left it vulnerable to all manner of malfunctions, from faulty electrical systems to engines that sputtered and stalled at the most inopportune moments. It was as if the Yugo had a personal vendetta against its drivers, determined to make their lives as miserable as possible. But the Yugo's infamy wasn't limited to its underwhelming performance. Its very name became synonymous with failure and disappointment, spawning a litany of derisive quips. As one popular joke went, "What do you call a Yugo with a flat tire? Totaled." Another zinger suggested that the best way to double a Yugo's value was simply to fill up its gas tank. Yet despite its well-earned reputation as a lemon, the Yugo GV remains an unforgettable part of automotive history. Its legacy as a cautionary tale of shoddy craftsmanship and poor design endures to this day, reminding us that sometimes the most memorable cars are the ones we'd rather forget. But the Yugo wasn't the only 80s car to leave drivers scratching their heads in bewilderment. Another head-scratcher was the Subaru Brat, a peculiar pickup truck with a few surprises up its sleeve. Subaru's quirky little pickup, the Brat, was a head-turner for all the wrong reasons. This oddball truck boasted a pair of rear-facing plastic jump seats welded right into the cargo bed. Sure, they helped Subaru skirt around those pesky import tariffs by classifying the Brat as a passenger car, but at what cost? These jump seats were about as practical as a screen door on a submarine. Imagine trying to cram your friends back there, watching them hold on for dear life as you hit every bump and pothole. It's no wonder the seats performance were ditched after the '85 model year, but the Brat's flaws didn't stop there. While it tried to blend the versatility of a small truck with the nimbleness of a car, it ended up falling short on both fronts. The impractical design and overall quirkiness led to a lukewarm reception from buyers. Despite its shortcomings, the Brat managed to stick around in various export markets until 1994, a testament to its niche appeal. But for most folks, this peculiar pickup was just too far off the beaten path. Speaking of cars that missed the mark, let's shift gears and take a closer look at another 80s misfit, the Pontiac Fiero. The Pontiac Fiero, a mid-engine sports car with plastic body panels, seemed like a radical departure from the norm, but beneath its sleek exterior, the Fiero was plagued by a host of issues that quickly tarnished its reputation. Early models were saddled with anemic engines, like the Iron Duke 4-cylinder, that struggled to break the 100 horsepower barrier. This lackluster performance left many drivers feeling let down, especially given the Fiero's sporty appearance. To make matters worse, the Fiero gained notoriety for its tendency to burst into flames, a safety hazard that sent shockwaves through the automotive world. The car's cobbled together design, which borrowed parts from other GM models not intended for a sports car, resulted in poor handling and a less than stellar driving experience. The lack of power steering and temperamental brakes only added to the Fiero's woes. Despite its innovative styling and mid-engine layout, the Pontiac Fiero struggled to shake off its bad rap. It was a classic case of a car that promised the world but delivered disappointment. But the Fiero wasn't the only 80s car that left consumers scratching their heads. Another automotive oddity was the AMC Pacer, a vehicle that boldly went where no car had gone before, for better or worse. Remember the AMC Pacer? This automotive oddball from the 70s had grand ambitions but fell short in execution. AMC envisioned the Pacer as a game changer, a compact car that would leave rivals like the Chevy Vega and Ford Pinto in the dust. But when plans for a fuel-efficient Wankel rotary engine fizzled out, the Pacer was stuck with a thirsty inline-six that guzzled more gas than its competitors. The Pacer's unconventional wide, bubble-like design prioritized passenger comfort and safety, but its poor aerodynamics and hefty weight dragged down performance. Even that longer right side door for easier backseat access couldn't make up for the Pacer's impracticality. Quality issues and lackluster performance quickly tarnished its reputation, and sales nosedived. By 1980, fewer than 10,000 Pacers found homes annually. Despite its failings, the AMC Pacer remains an iconic part of automotive history, immortalized in pop culture by appearances in movies like Wayne's World. Love it or hate it, this quirky car was undeniably memorable, but the 80s had no shortage of automotive misfits. Another eco-warrior that missed the mark was the pint-sized city car, a plucky electric vehicle with big dreams but limited range. Komoda Car City Car. Remember the pint-sized city car? That plucky electric vehicle from the 80s with big dreams but limited range. This tiny two-seater was the brainchild of Sebring Vanguard, who hoped to cash in on the eco-friendly car craze. But the city car's good intentions couldn't make up for its shortcomings. With a top speed of just 28 miles per hour and a range of only 35 miles per charge, even less with hills or cold weather, the city car was more suited for puttering around the neighborhood than tackling the daily commute. And let's not forget the safety concerns. The city car's shoebox-like design might have been eye-catching, but it left much to be desired in terms of crash protection. Despite upgrades like real doors instead of flimsy plastic curtains, the city car struggled to shake off its reputation as a flimsy death trap on wheels. It's no wonder that consumers ultimately gave this pint-sized pioneer a hard pass, but the 80s had no shortage of automotive letdowns. Across the pond, another car was gearing up to disappoint, the Citroen Visa. Across the pond, the Citroen Visa was gearing up to disappoint. Launched in 1978 with much fanfare, this French compact car aimed to replace the aging Ami and win over European drivers. But the Visa's quirky styling and lackluster performance left consumers scratching their heads. The dashboard's unique design might have been typically Citroen, but it couldn't distract from the car's flaws. Even a 1981 redesign couldn't boost the Visa's popularity enough to meet expectations. Innovative features like the convertible roof options on some models were overshadowed by the car's struggles with reliability and performance. Sporty variants like the Visa GTI and the Group B Racer Trophy tried to inject some excitement, but they couldn't change the overall perception of the Visa as a letdown. Today, spotting a Citroen Visa on the roads is about as likely as finding a four-leaf clover, especially in the UK, but the 80s still had a few more automotive mishaps in store, like a luxury brand's ill-fated attempt to go mainstream. Cadillac Cimarron. Speaking of missteps, the Cadillac Cimarron stands as a cautionary tale of brand mismanagement. This compact car, introduced in 1982, was meant to be Cadillac's entry into the small luxury vehicle market. But beneath the Cimarron's Cadillac badging lurked a dirty secret. It was little more than a gussied-up Chevrolet Cavalier. The Cimarron shared its humble underpinnings with other GM economy cars, yet Cadillac had the audacity to charge a premium price for this wolf in sheep's clothing. Consumers quickly saw through the charade, and the Cimarron became a laughingstock. Its lackluster performance, uninspired design, and obvious cost-cutting measures tarnished Cadillac's once prestigious reputation. Despite a few rare bright spots, like the occasional manual transmission option, the Cimarron never managed to shake off its image as a lazy rebadged job. Today, it serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of diluting a brand's identity in pursuit of short-term gains. But the 80s had one more automotive icon up its sleeve, a car that would become more famous for its time on the silver screen than its time on the road. The 1981 DeLorean DMC-12, a sports car that became a cultural phenomenon, even though it never quite lived up to its promises on the road. This stainless steel beauty with its iconic gull-wing doors captured the imagination of a generation. But behind the scenes, the DeLorean was plagued by production delays and quality control issues that would ultimately lead to its downfall. Powered by a modest 130 horsepower V6 engine, the DMC-12 couldn't keep up with its sportier rivals. The heavy steering made it a handful to drive, and the interior quality left much to be desired. John DeLorean's legal troubles only added to the car's woes, tarnishing its reputation and leading to the end of production after just 2 years. But the DeLorean story didn't end there. In 1985, it gained a new lease on life thanks to a starring role in the blockbuster film Back to the Future. As Doc Brown's time machine of choice, the DMC-12 became an instant icon, cementing its place in pop culture history. As we reach the end, let's raise a glass to the worst cars of the 80s. The ones that dared to be different, even if they didn't always succeed. They may have been flawed, but they were also unforgettable, and that's what makes them true icons of their time. Be sure to check out our other videos and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating journeys through car history.